Quiet on the set. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. I'm Dear Myrtle, your friend in genealogy. Welcome to the GenDoc study group, where we are studying Chapter 12 of Dr. Thomas W. Jones's Mastering Genealogical Documentation. And our topic is identifying offline publishers and repositories. And so we're going to discuss today whether or not we need to include provenance. We're going to discuss differences in citing offline published versus unpublished items. We're going to consider how handwritten letters are witness statements and discover the role that an inanimate object can have, all when handwriting can be tied to one individual. And we're going to skip to the middle and start with Lisa's homework because she has to leave at a certain point. Cousin Russ will share with you the link to this PDF file. What I do, well, first of all, what the panel does, because they do 99% of the work. Well, Dr. Jones did a lot too. But anyway, our members of the panel are here. They know they're on the panel. They're the same ones every week. Sometimes, like Melinda's away. Her flight left earlier than planned. She's on her way to New York. But anyway, we all read the chapter in advance. Then we submit homework based on, some part of the chapter that speaks to us, and we use our own examples. That way, yes, we're studying Dr. Jones's work, but out of respect for privacy, not privacy, Cousin Russ, copyright, got the wrong word there, we don't use his homework questions and answers. And we did this by design. Tell me just a minute, Russ, about the legal genealogist and what we did in visiting with her.
Well, we wanted to make sure that what we were proposing in a study group was met the guidelines for the Association for Professional Genealogists and BCG, Board of Certified Genealogists, and from a legal standpoint. So we had a conversation with the legal genealogist, Judy G. Russell.
Mm-hmm. We do not want to interfere with your need, well, let's say with the National Genealogical Society's right to sell this book.
There's one other thing that came out of this once we did it, turned the homework around first, is that we have the experience of a number of researchers dealing with this book. So it's not a canned question, but it's how each of the panelists who do the homework react to what's in the book. So it's from their own research and using their own examples. And I know myself, I've learned by doing some of this stuff myself, reading the book, doing the homework, maybe not publishing the homework, but working through the exercise. I learned stuff.
I learned stuff too. That is for sure. And what you're looking at on my screen is the printout. What I do is I take every bit of homework that's been submitted by our panelists. I compile them all into one huge Microsoft Word document, and then I print it out. And as you can see, I react to the homework. And in the case of Lisa, which we're going to skip to, close your eyes while I scroll down far. Okay, Lisa, let's talk about your homework. You are doing a good job here of talking about what's published versus unpublished. And I labeled your photos that you actually went to the bookshelf at the Merced County Historical Society.
Yeah, so where the hole is where the books were. I realized when I took this photo that I still had the books on the table.
That's okay. It gets the job done. But
the flip side is it's a good reminder of where you could put the books back to, or where it was when you saw it at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah, and saying where you saw it at that time on that bookshelf makes it easier for me if I find out I'm your cousin and I want to double check your research. Hopefully this record set is still there at the Historical Society. They could be like the archivist, the archive lady in Houston County, Tennessee. Their archive for the county is moving to a different building. So if I cited a document that I viewed from a shelf in her building now, which is in the basement of the courthouse, and I use that address for that at that point in time, it would be a different address come next summer. They're hoping to move this spring. I guess they have to do some little bit of renovation, the interior of the jail building where they're moved. So Melissa's going to jail, but I digress. So anyway, so you and I, so if I followed along later and these books had been moved to a different address, my citation would be different from yours, Lisa.
Yes, it would.
And that's okay. All right, so you got the where is it on that shelf in this building at this address. And
which
then,
I did not include in the citation. I didn't say what shelf it was on.
Well, that's okay, but we get the point.
Yeah,
I was being overly dramatic. So then you have the spine of the book.
The book, yeah.
Voter registration, original affidavits for that time period, 1926-27.
I've never seen these kinds of books before. I was very excited by them because we have extensive voter registration, great registers for California for every 2 years, and they're fantastic. They're printed, but this is the actual application that was filled out, I think by the registrar, but the signatures of the registrant is original.
Well, let's go look at one, and it looks like this is one of those, like before we had ACO binders that you could hole punch and put things in. This is the forerunner to that.
Right.
And so it looks like it's a bound volume, but all of these papers were obviously hole punched somehow and bound into this book. And there is the original. Is this the Agnes? Is the
Agnes Nielsen?
Okay. So what is the where is?
Well, the where is at it's in Merced at the Merced County Historical Society.
So we've got that in your proposed citation.
In my proposed citation, yeah, and I called it proposed because I was really unsure. This is outside of my comfort zone. This offline stuff. So this is really good chapter for me.
All right, well, let's dissect. The blue part of your citation that I put in this box is the where is. That it was at the Historical Society that happens to be in and the book is in the Courthouse Museum.
Yeah, it's in the old courthouse, and they have, the Historical Society has the whole building.
So
it was fantastic.
So you could put a discursive note or a square bracket in front of this blue Merced County and put, or I mean Merced County Courthouse. You could put old, which would, if you hadn't put the address, or you could put the address.
Right.
Because I might go to the current county courthouse, not looking at, oh, there's the word museum after that. I may have to work on that. But now the first part has to do with the author or the compiler. And the compiler of all these affidavits is Merced County, California County Clerk.
Yes.
So that looks pretty darn good. Affidavit of registration. I see why you put voter, because look at the form.
It doesn't say.
Yeah. But when we look back here, and it still doesn't say anything on the title. So this is one of those cases where Dr. Jones says we sometimes have to create a title that makes sense, which sounds pretty cavalier on our part when we're trying to be so exact. So I see why you put that in square brackets, because you're saying, look, guys, it's the voter registration, not the marriage license registration.
Right.
Okay, cool. All right, how do y'all feel about her citation?
Well, to be hypercritical, I would not have capitalized voter because that implies it's part of the title. At least to me, when I first looked at it, I would have just put lowercase, and then that's being hypercritical.
What did you think about the square brackets? Was the capital V more powerful than the square brackets?
Well, the square brackets I thought belonged because it doesn't say because that's her interpretation of what this affidavit of registration is, which makes sense to me. But then, you know what I mean? And again, I'm opening myself up to be slammed when you get to my homework.
No, old Mert doesn't have the energy to slam people.
Well, there's 7 other slammers here on the panel.
No, we love each other. That's how we learn.
And I'm just telling you how I felt about it. That's all. You asked and I told.
Okay, so anybody else have any comments here? To me, it doesn't matter if it's a capital V or a lowercase v, but whatever you do in your work, Carrie has told us, be consistent. Glob onto one that you like and be consistent. Do that throughout. Now, I'm not perfectly consistent because I've got my old PAF data, personal ancestral file data, where I was a newbie and didn't cite things very well. And I haven't gone through all those million, well, I don't have millions of entries, but I have thousands of entries about record sets I consulted that are not evidence explained style.
I have a question.
Or Dr. Jones style. Yes, Russ.
I have a question. And I'm slowly reacting to Dave's comment. Lisa, in that book of affidavits, was there different types of affidavits in that book?
No, they were all identical. And at the very top, you can't see it very well with that image. It actually had check marks indicating that she voted.
Okay. All right.
Now, voted, ballot number.
Now, the reason why I bring it up is if something doesn't leap out at me, but I believe it to be true, I would capitalize the word voter because it may not be evident. So in this specific case, where the whole album, whole notebook or whatever you want to call that thing, container of documents was all the same, then I would not capitalize the V. But if there are other kinds of affidavits in that, then I might emphasize the word voter as opposed to what else might be in that book.
That's a good point, Russ. I like that.
And I see Dave's taken up drinking. What's in your cask? I don't know. All right, yeah, I did try to zoom in a little so you can see she voted at least twice. Those are her ballot numbers. So that was one each year, it looks like.
And since the whole book is, then I would not emphasize the word the V, because the whole book is the same thing.
Also, it may be different if what you've done in the narrative up above this citation, you may have said, and she voted in 1926 and 1927, and then you have your citation down below, and it would be redundant to put voter as part of the citation. So, cool.
I find it interesting that she had to describe her height here. It's almost like we talked today about should we use driver's licenses for identification. You see where that says my height is 5 feet 3 inches?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
They did that in all the voter, well, not all, but a lot of the voter registration, because that's how you could tell one person from another, or tell that who that person was. There was no photo IDs.
Oh, sure, but I mean, it goes to the identification issue that's pretty hot topic in some places.
Yeah.
I It was important back then.
Yeah.
And it's great in the early 1800 one, or the 1800s, the late 1800 ones, to have a description of the man, because it's all men at that time. Because you don't have any photos.
That's true. I totally get this.
For my Progen proof argument, I was able to use those descriptions from the California registers to prove somebody's identity. So they can be very useful.
And you know what? We went to this for a signature. That was the thing you talked about.
Right.
And then we went to, hey, she voted just a few years after women were given the right to vote. And now Marceline is pointing out every information item on that page could be useful depending on, as Cousin Russ says, what is the research question? What question you're trying to answer.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So let's go to, anything from the community? Are we doing okay, Russ?
We're doing okay.
All righty. I'm so glad you're here. We were having trouble with people in New Jersey being able to connect to our hangout this morning.
Oh.
All right. So now we have a second example. And tell me about microfilm versus the original book.
Yeah, so I didn't see the originals of these tax records in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. I was at a historical society. Well, actually, it was a genealogy society. And I'm thinking, because of the way the image looks, that this came from a microfilm, but maybe it came from a printed book that they had photocopied.
I've seen that where you go somewhere and they've printed out every page from the microfilm.
Right, and that might be what it was. But that's an indication, though, that the original is somewhere else. And so the original could be in the Beaver County courthouse or wherever the tax records are kept. So I investigated. I went to the Pennsylvania archives to see what I could find out about these records. And I discovered that they were part of the, and I'll scroll down so I can, I can't remember what.
Okay, I'm getting there.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so they were part of the Board of County Commissioners who had done these. And the State Archives website had all of the records that they had on microfilm from every county. And so these tax records were listed there.
Okay, so if it was the board of, I would have gone to the tax office because I did that a few times in Manatee County, Florida. You know, and they may call it the assessor's office, but these were created by the Board of County Commissioners. I don't know if they housed it in the assessor's office. Yeah, and it would be different in another, you know, in Louisiana, they don't have counties. They're called parishes, and they have nothing to do with the church per se, because we have separation of church and state.
And we're talking 1843. I think today they're probably in some kind of assessor's office.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, things change over time.
Yeah.
But that's who the author was at the time.
Yeah.
So that was good information that I got from the State Archives website that I didn't get by looking at the item
itself on
at the Genealogy Society. Yes. And I feel really bad that I did really bad thing here. I did not take pictures of the book or the card or anything like that while I was there.
Because you were excited that you actually found an entry on your family.
Yeah, it was that, and I had somebody else waiting for me. You're like, when are you going to get done?
I know.
So you rush. It's all bad.
Yeah. That's why I'm so happy I'm married to Mr. Mert, because he doesn't mind if we stay an extra day at a courthouse or library to do something, because he understands.
Right.
All right. One other thing to tell you all, well, two actually. Number one, I fessed up to lightening up this photo with the photo editing software that's part of Microsoft Word, because when I first printed out the page, this was so dark that it was basically unreadable. I could read it better on my screen. So I lightened it up. And this is why a one-off partial screen capture without the full page can be suspect, because we don't know if this came from a completely other source. It could be a different locality. It could be that I've not only lightened it up, but modified the value of the house to make it look as though I had a wealthy ancestor, which is a silly thing. But I'm saying that to get the point across that if you had looked at this as Lisa did in the context of a whole world of microfilm, or in the whole a book that's got a printout from every page of the microfilm, that's different from my looking at, for instance, this could have been in a blog post that you did, Lisa. And of course, I always suspect everything you do. So it's all good. All right. Thank you. All right. So you can now go happily on your way. But let's look at that citation here. Beaver County, Pennsylvania Board of County Commissioners. Tax list. And Falston is the county or locality?
Yeah, the township.
No, that township in Beaver County, right? Yeah. For 1843, page 13, Amos Gorell. And that's not the way you spell your name, is it?
No, but that's the way it was spelled on the document.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Then it was at the, it's housed at the Pennsylvania State Archives, Record Group 47. You don't know the microfilm number, and that's because you didn't go to the Pennsylvania State Archives to find it, did you?
No, I didn't. And I'm thinking now I didn't look at it on microfilm either, that I looked at it in their printed out books, photocopied books. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the whole point of having these discussions, is so we can differentiate. You did go to the Pennsylvania State Archives site to learn more about why the record set was created, who created it, what was the purpose. And Cousin Russ always points us to that. Like when you're at Ancestry, you have to click, find out more about this record set. And then that informs our ability to interpret the information. It's pretty cut and dry. You paid taxes.
Right. But I listed the archives because this was created, the microphone was created by them. And if someone else wanted to look at this, that's where they could go.
Okay. And Valerie?
I'm sitting here biting at the bit. If this is your first reference note, the RG should be record group 47, and then in parentheses or square brackets put RG, because that's the first time you're using the initialism. So,
yes.
Thank you. You're right.
Also, we're right when we say you need to cite what you looked at. Oh dear, she has to step away.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Things happen. You need to cite what you looked at. And
yeah, so I guess I really should have said the whole thing about the genealogy censor.
Okay, how do you feel about that, Russ? I can tell, even with your beard.
Thinking.
Yeah, he's thinking. I can tell by how you pursed your lips with your mustache and your beard. Yeah, think about citing what you're actually looking at. What if the pages, page 13, was not printed on the page? It was handwritten. Was it handwritten because after they did the photocopies of each page, there's a lot of variables here, that you could or could not take into consideration, because page 13 in the microfilm group, if you look at the microfilm, might be different.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm excited that you found this document as well. So thank you. All right. We spent a lot of time on yours. Let's go to Marceline. Thank you, Lisa, for your homework.
Thank you.
Okay, Marceline, I'm going to focus on you while I ever so graciously scroll back to page 2, which is where I think we find your homework. So you have the example of a certificate of ordination. Talk to me about that and why you think you're going to change your citation. Not that I disagree, I just want to know more about your thinking.
As far as I know, this is the only copy of the ordination certificate. The denomination might have a copy in their archives, but that would be the only place that it would be. So
they might have an entry in a book, just a one-line entry, and have given a full certificate. I can see that happening.
Yeah, I don't even know where the archives for the denomination is. It used to be headquartered in New York, but they moved to Colorado about 20 years ago. So I don't know if all the archives is still in New York because there is a college there, or if it's in Colorado now. But at any rate, if there is another copy of this certificate, that would be the only place it would be. So I thought if I was using this as evidence for my father being an ordained minister, that it would be important for the reader to understand how I got to be the possessor of the certificate.
So that speaks to the provenance.
Exactly.
So what I did was to underscore the purple text, which shows up better on one monitor of mine than it does the other. Apparently they're not synchronized on their color calibration, but I circled that part, certificate received by, as you had up above. And in your case, provenance could really mean something because, as you say, you're not sure. I mean, you cited what you saw, the actual document, and that kind of follows along with what we just said with Lisa. But you don't know where the original actually is, or if there's another original and yours is the copy, your father's is the copy.
Right.
Or, you know, where the book that lists all the ordained, all the people that were ordained for the last 100 years of this church. Now we are getting more information, Christian and Missionary Alliance Certificate of Ordination, and who signed it, and all of that. So good. How do you all feel about the citation? And Marceline, isn't it interesting when we do our homework, we'll cite something a certain way, and then 2 days later we'll look at it and say, why did I do that? But I think it's reasonable, don't you think? I think this is good. I like it.
Thanks.
I just comment from my working in an office that would have issued those certificates. The certificate would be given to the person who was ordained, and that certificate would have a register entry in a register book. So that's from my tradition, and that's how we operated. We would create the certificate. It would be signed by the appropriate authority, and the certificate with a seal, in our case, would be given to the person who was just ordained, but that would also have an entry in an ordination book held by the office.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And we're talking different faith traditions here, but there had to, and we don't know what has survived. Like you say, they move, we don't know. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so any comments on this? This one is, oh, you've got your doggy with you, Lisa. Apparently the dog likes your citation, so you're good, Marceline. Talk to me then. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for that because you're making me think. And of particular interest is this sentence where you said a discussion of the provenance would lend more credibility to the authenticity of the evidence, the reliability. We'd see the motivation. In this day and age where you can order a certificate online to be a doctor or minister or whatever.
Or you can you don't even have to order it online. If you have Microsoft Publisher, you can create one yourself.
Oh my heavens, you're right. You're right. So we do see some provenance that you didn't make this up. about your dad.
I have one question.
Yes?
Does that certificate have a seal?
I think it does.
I would make that note with a mark of a seal. Everything is there, but I would just add with the mark of a seal.
Okay.
Okay. I'm trying to pull up my scan of the document now.
Just a comment.
So Hillary, you made a comment in the unified chat about provenance. Would you voice that for the recording, please?
Yeah, I put that we need to, we've all got personal papers that we've inherited, so we all need to describe how we receive them so that it can add to the provenance, because where you receive them from might have a bearing on how somebody else would consider, how helpful that somebody else might consider that anything that you cite from that document.
Mm-hmm. Man, Cousin Russ, we've gone a long way from those old family group sheets and pedigree charts where it just had a little box about 1 inch tall and about 2 inches wide, and with the label sources. You know, we were getting down to the nitty gritty. We would end up having more pages of sources, you know, the first source list entry. Oh, forget it. I can't get that whole sentence out. Than we would for the face page, which is the family group sheet. It's just amazing. And I'm glad that we're in this day and age. It pulls us from being little newbie hobbyists. No offense. I still am new when it comes to, I'm working on Minnesota research and learning, but I don't know it all. Yeah. It moves us from that to the more professional realm. And Cousin Russ, yes, you are a professional. You adhere to the genealogical proof standard. You're human like the rest of us. Professional doesn't mean that you have to take money for the work you do. You're a philanthropist. Okay. Hey, thank you, Marceline. And thank you.
You're welcome.
For that example. Okay, now we're going to move on to Valerie. And so we're talking about the exception of spelling out names of states and whatever, you know, whatever a 3-letter abbreviation for the name of a state, that's not going to help Hillary.
Right. Because genealogy has gone global.
Yep.
And they won't know what FLA or MN or CO means. And so I take it to spell it out, the location to spell it out. And depending upon if that name of the town is in the title of the newspaper or not will depend on where I put it. And that's why I added a couple examples, you know, which I base again on Evidence Explained. But, you know, like the Albert Lea Tribune, Albert Lea is in the name of the newspaper. So that's why I put Minnesota in parentheses in italics immediately after Albert Lea. But for the Gazette newspaper in Colorado Springs, that's not in the masthead or the title, so I put it after.
Well, and then you've got tricky ones like there is the Seattle Times and the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. And I don't know, but what Seattle is a unique city name.
Right.
But there are numerous examples where children and grandchildren move from the East Coast where there was a town by a certain name, and then they named their new town a couple of states or territories away by that same name. And so you got to be specific.
Right. And I followed the sentence style, which the capitalization, the commas, you know, like Colorado Springs, comma, Colorado. So, yeah, but that's why I was taken aback by seeing those 9 options. It's like, whoa, but this is based on his option 4.
Yes. Well, how do you
make
feel
a comment about that?
Yeah, jump in, Dave.
I was concerned about that. And number 3, especially where it says Bradenton Herald, and you wouldn't describe where Bradenton is. And I just happen to know that there's probably 35 or 40 Springfields in the United States alone.
Yes. There you go.
So you can, because when I cite the Springfield Republican, I always put Springfield and then I put Massachusetts in brackets Republican to define which Springfield we're talking about. There isn't another Springfield Republican anywhere in the country, but just for the sake of being thorough, I always put Springfield in the newspaper citation.
Well,
so this is weird the way I just didn't agree with some of the stuff.
It's in parentheses rather than square brackets.
Yes. Good point.
And I point to page 795 in EE3.
Yeah.
But yeah, like my hometown, Waverly, I didn't know that there were other Waverlys in other states. So it makes sense. That's a very good way of putting it, Dave.
Well, I since we're global now,
not international, we're global.
Since we're global, I believe that we need to include countries. For an example, New England is filled with city names that are based on a city in another country. Another example, in the state of New Jersey, as massive as the state is, there are 4 Washington townships.
I can't believe that. But I know you're right. Yeah.
There are 4 Washington townships, and 2 of them actually are next to one another in different counties.
That sounds like there was some political intrigue there.
But this is expanding on what Valerie says. We need to spell out as much as we can, and I'm glad that some of our genealogy software programs are including that as a feature, so you can spell it out, and if you want to hide some fields in a report or so, you can do that. But in the database, to be consistent, you can spell out the whole hierarchy of that town, like Washington, New Jersey. Which Washington, New Jersey are you talking about?
Right. And that gets to the next part of your homework, and I do have a couple of comments I just starred. Okay. Sometimes in a citation, they can appear to be wordy, but if you have 15 words, 7 of them are the name of the building, then it's initialism, then 5 words for the name of the office within the building, then the city and the city's location. Omitting any one of those might cause confusion. Thank you for quoting that. We are allowed to quote a sentence or 2 from the book without infringing on copyright. And Dr. Jones and the publisher are very happy that we do these study groups. And this is the newest one. Omitting any part of it would cause confusion. We wouldn't know which Washington township. So everybody's right on task here with this.
And that's why, going back to Marceline's homework, I would have included the location. Where was that certificate or ordination certificate originally generated at? What location? City?
Did it mention it on the form? Because you have to cite what you're looking at,
right,
Marceline.
No, I know where the ordination ceremony took place based on family history knowledge, but I'm not sure what office generated the certificate.
And there's nothing on the form itself.
No.
Then you would put it in square brackets, but that clarifies the location.
There's a difference between, well, what are you saying, Russ?
I would put the location where it took place. Well, we could have a discussion about that.
Yeah.
Where did it take place? Where did that person receive that certificate from? That person didn't generate it. He received it at the ordination. So I would put at the place where he received it.
There was an exam, and I have the certificate of examination where he went through all the oral defenses and stuff like that. And then later there was a ordination ceremony in Mattoon, Illinois, and that's where he actually received the certificate.
Right. So
some of it might be mentioned in the narrative, the paragraphs above, and then this is your citation.
Right.
And then there would be justification for putting the location in discursive notes. What is that term again, Cherie? I can read her lips. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that contribution to this morning's discussion.
That's why I put it in red, so you could see what the where is, and then going back to Jones's explanation of why it's so long. That was like, great. This is a aha learning moment of why. You know, I know to do it, but why? And what do those things mean? And that was explained in this chapter. So you had mentioned there on, and you have ancestor in quotation. I didn't put that in there because I was following as a template his footnote that was a DAR membership application, and it did not include it. But I guess if it's our own personal citations or our own personal work, we could include that.
Well, you're also following along with this sample that, just a minute here,
that thanks to Sherry pointed out.
Yeah, that it's on Josiah Walden and the applicant's and the ancestor number, as opposed to the applicant's DAR number. The ancestor, whether he was a serviceman, he or she provided patriotic service. I think you can get in if your ancestor was a privateer, can't you? That's patriotic service. Yep, you guys are shaking. I don't have a privateer, but anyway, yeah. So on this is the citation guidelines slip that Cherie scanned. Tell us about the provenance of this paperwork. How did you get this?
It's on the DAR public site.
Okay.
There, if you click on the library, and under the library, there's they have research guides.
Okay.
And one of the research guides is how to cite when you're using any of their sources, from whether it's a library book from their library or a membership application or.
Okay, so here I am. I'm at the DAR website. You want me to go to
library?
Yes.
Yes.
How-to guides, is that where it is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Wow, this is easy to find.
And then the first one there, citing, quoting, and reproducing DAR sources.
Okay, so I'm clicking on that. And that's how we get to this form. So I'll give a copy of this form. Now, where this came to my attention was in the secret group that our panelists have on Facebook, because we sometimes discuss homework between us or figure out how to cite something together. They are very good at communicating with me when they're going to be out of town, etc. I see Lisa's still here, so we got you taken care of in plenty of time. But yeah, so you'll want to look at that and see some fictitious examples for citing the database itself.
Val's and their example are almost identical.
Yeah.
Phew.
Yeah. Well, I would have gotten there from here on your homework, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm not worried about really anything we're doing. My initial reaction was he an ancestor or was he I mean, obviously he's an ancestor. Was he a patriotic service person or a serviceman? But that would have been part of the narrative up above. You're just citing where you found this information. And there's a distinction between that. In fact, in his methodology book, Mastering Genealogical Proof, Dr. Jones talks to us about if you end up putting a lot of discursive notes around the citation, maybe you need to consider if that should be up in the narrative itself. Or are you doing so much explanation up in the narrative that it obscures your train of thought when you're establishing or composing your proof argument? should you move some of that down below and make it a discursive note? There's some weighing of factors there.
Right.
So it's very good. Okay.
So that's why I'm wondering, I'm working on the updating this book. Of course, I've been working on it for a couple of years now, so I don't know when it's going to be done. I don't know the end format is going to be, if it's going to be all digital or what. But I'm thinking now, I was just going to do an update and corrections for this book and additional research I've done since it. But now I'm thinking, looking at these source citations, if I should do the whole book all over again so that the citations can be almost picture perfect. I mean, they were pretty good back here in 1993.
Well, that's very good. Yes.
So anyway, that's the, what do we decide to do type thing.
I totally hear that. Well, cool.
But thank you.
All right. So when in your scanned images of the application for membership, and my application for DAR is not going to be hard at all, because I dovetail into several accepted and not up for reevaluation. No redlined applications are part of it. But where I dovetail is around the time of the Civil War. And I've easily proved my relationship to that generation. Easily, multiple documents, especially now that I know about the Gretna Green scenario with my parents, and that they weren't married in Seattle, they were married in Port Orchard, Washington. At the first time I went up to bat with DAR, I couldn't get in because I couldn't prove my parents were married, since I didn't have their marriage certificate.
And you know what? Now marriages are not necessary to prove.
I know the rules. So, I kept playing the piano for him, and Flag Day with joint meetings with SAR, I was still there. So the rules have changed somewhat. The rules have changed from the beginning with DAR applications, that you could just say he was my father or my grandfather. And people knew that it was supposedly your father or your grandfather because they lived in the same town. And those are now disallowed, and you need to do the research and prove the service and prove the relationship.
And the application, this one is 4 or 5 pages. I've done some filing because I'm cleaning up my office. So I've since put this away off my floor back into Jacob's file, but I think it was 4 pages. So the citation is going to have a few things added to it in whatever point I'm citing or research question I'm answering in my narrative or in my notes for that person's, say, birthday, because Helen Marshall included dates, relationships, and so forth when I first got this, supplied me with clues to those dates. So just remember that your citation will either be added to or this is the basic one, and then you can add to it. That's what I'm trying to get.
This fall, I say all the time. I've listened to several of our Hangout recordings lately, and I say a lot, and I'm going to try hard to break myself of that habit. So zap me, Russ, if I keep saying Okay.
That's okay. I caught myself 10 times last night saying
Anyway, Pam Sayer had been trying to craft a citation for a DAR application, and the page where these dates were listed was not included in what she received. And it had to do with ordering and right to privacy of a living individual, etc. So she could not include the date. And this caused quite an uproar on Facebook. And if you don't have the date in a citation, because that page is not part of what you are looking at, then you can't cite the date. However, I think it was for her portfolio, for her renewal of the Board for Certification of Genealogists, and she felt she had to have it in there. That wasn't an that was an yeah. I gotta work on it. Okay, Well, interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for your homework. Anything else I missed on this? I think we pretty much have it.
Just to have the list of abbreviations when you go to publish, and publishing could be in any format. It doesn't have to be, hardbound. But in all of my publications, I had that list of abbreviations. I was so excited because I didn't know I was following Thomas Jones back then. I gave one example of, having to write Freeborn County Historical Society, Museum and Library a million times. So, that's why I put that in the front so that everybody knows what those initials, that you can invent. He says it's okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So that's really important point. And you can use that as your style guide. When you're entering data, I'm sure, Russ, all of us have some sort of style guide. We also follow the genealogy software or the proper standards, but, that's really helpful too.
That also tells us that as researchers, when using a book like yours, we need to not only copy the title page and copyright page, sometimes it's all on the front side, older ones, the copyright's on the back, depends on their style guide, but we also need to photocopy or digitize for our use the front matter that includes abbreviations, because you think you're going to remember what it means, but you don't when you get home. And that's frustrating. Okay, so we're going to take some comments from the community for a bit.
Let me bring this one in from Jackie. Does this mean that citations change based on the research question, even though there is no change in what is being cited?
Or what is being looked at?
The basic citation model should not. It's what you're adding to it. Like, for instance, I'm trying to think of an example, like what I will use for this DAR application. It gave our common ancestor, great-great-great-grandfather, whatever, it would be Jacob's son. That was my broken link. I thought I had it and stuff. Well, so I got his name, I got his wife's name, I got his birth date, I got his birthplace, I got their marriage, and so forth, that I didn't have before until I got this application in 1989. So my citation for those items, I added William's birth, for William's birth date ahead of the word membership application in the very beginning.
Okay, so if the research question, in my case, I was looking at a Civil War Union pension file, and that was the first instance I ever had of a marriage record where there was a certified notice from the clerk of the court or whomever that there was this entry for marriage in the marriage book, something or other, and that was submitted as proof because they weren't going to tear out the page of the book.
Right.
And so I cited that document out of all of them that are in a pension file typically, and that was the one, Cousin Russ, with the affidavits about her living with other men while the old soldier was in this home. So it was a thick file. But the research question was, were they actually ever married? I had to prove that. Well, I had documentary evidence. And I've since found the actual marriage record scanned in an online collection. But what I had for many decades was just what was in the pension file, certified by the clerk of the court. Yes, Russ?
I am now totally confused. I'm totally confused on the use of a citation. Are you saying if you have that standalone document that you have, that you might have 15 citations, one for the name, one for the birthday, one for some other stuff? Are you saying you would have 15 citations?
No, what I create a citation once and copy it and paste all the various different places.
Where?
So, okay, so this
in your
one
narrative?
in my research notes, because I put my citations in my notes for each individual in my legacy database. So I got Jacob Lair's son William's birth date and place, like I said, and marriage, and his wife's name from Helen Marshall's application here. On the page numbers aren't numbered, so on the third page of the application, it has, you know, the descendancy, and that's where I initially in 1989. 6 months into getting started, where I got his name and birth date and who he married and when. And so at the very beginning, right before the word membership, I have William's birth, marriage, and so forth in front of that. And then I have the standardized citation. And then I got the same thing for his son, you know, because the application, you know, has to go by generation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the basic Legal Beagle, when I call Legal Beagle, I look over here because that's on my other screen. Legal Beagle citation for this document is what you see there. Mm-hmm. And then in front of it is where I add specific to that other item, information item within that document. So no, I don't create it 15 times. I create it once. You know, it's kind of like sewing. You measure once, you know, cut twice or whatever. I can't remember what that is.
Measure
but anyway,
twice,
measure twice.
That's it. Measure. Yeah, that I heard that years ago, and I applied it to the citations where I create it once and then copy and paste it several times into different places that I need it.
Okay, so that's where her software is guiding where she's putting it to answer those questions, not in a narrative. But let's bring in Linda Jordan's comment, Russ, because that's apropos.
All right. Okay, Linda says, what about when you have a long dissertation about how you received a document? I have a military document found in a pouch, in a couch by somebody that bought the couch, found a family member that knew of my mom, contacted her, and when she went to England, received the document from the relative.
Wow, that is quite a history. So couch is like, what do you call them, Hillary, over there in England and Wales? A Davenport, a sofa?
Could be a sofa, could be called a settee.
Mm-hmm.
Depends what exactly it is, but those are the common ones.
All I ever find are nickels and dimes and quarters in our couch and a few crumbs from cookies left by grandchildren. Linda, how marvelous that military document was found. I said it again. Hopefully I'll break myself with this. So what do you think, folks, about this?
I put it at the very end, either as a discursive note or as an added explanation of provenance and how you came about obtaining it. That's what he talks about as well at the end of your Legal Beagle citation. It's not part of, it's right after it.
But you know what? If the point of your narrative was to write an article called Crazy Places I Found Documents, then it would be in the narrative.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it depends, Russ. We need that stamp. Thank you, Valerie, for your homework. I appreciate it. Okay, let me get back here and we'll scroll down. Let's see who's next. Hillary, I'm opening your blog post because we're talking about this document. And it's interesting how we can revisit some of the documents and thinking that we've brought to another study group as it applies here. So you found this image. There's a certified copy. Talk to me about this.
I brought this to the attention is that I've got different copies of certificates there. They've all got slightly different ways of reproducing the information. That one looks like it's possibly a photocopy or made of the original. Some of the ones later on in there were handwritten.
Okay, so like this one is like there's a form that's pre-printed with the green and they type the application number and all this for the certification, but that they took the image and imprinted it or printed it on the green form.
Yeah.
And then this one looks like a clerk wrote it by hand because that's fairly modern lettering.
Yeah. And then the one below it is a short certificate, so it actually has less information on it. But looking at the date on it, it looks like it's an original because the date it was witnessed was shortly after the date of birth. So that is actually an original that was actually issued. So
yeah, so not quite a month after the birth. Yes.
Yeah. So that would be quite. You can see that was an original person that actually wrote that. And then the one below it is a typed one. So again, it's different. Most of that's typed on there, other than maybe a signature is about all we've got otherwise. So we can't tell a lot from that as to the quality. How obviously it's been copied from somewhere. So, but it's not the same as good necessarily as a digital image might be. So. So we need to know where it comes from, because obviously if it's a copy of something that may already be a copy of something else, then it's important for the provenance.
It can make a big difference. Okay, now I'm moving from ums to ahs, but my brother Mike has dyslexia. So he will frequently transpose like the last two numbers in a year. So it would have been 1920 versus 1902. And it's a human thing. Or you're typing away. Look at all the typos I made in our private secret group this past week. I've made a couple of typos, to say the least. And I gave up after a while. I felt like I was all thumbs. And so we're human. All right, let's talk about the photograph.
Now, the photograph. This photograph is actually available in two publications. The first one was a book, which I've put the information that I've got. That the bit that I put underneath it was actually copied from my entry on library thing, because I've got it on there. So it's got all my information, and it's a published book, and that gives me the ISBN number and everything, and that it's no longer it's out of print now, but you can still get copies from some of the specialist booksellers do sell it. So and I managed to get a copy of this, and so I've actually managed to see the photograph and that in the book, and the blog post that I wrote actually had where the photograph can be found. Actually has a lot of information in it regarding what was written in the book about the photograph, because it actually tells you who's actually in the photograph. It was the person that wrote the book actually had a discussion with one of the people that's in the photograph, so they identified it.
Yeah, so there's more first-hand information. He interviewed somebody with first-hand knowledge of who he was sitting next to as they stood there for this portrait.
Yeah, and he actually says who the staff were included were such and such and that. So and he described a bit about what they did as well, which was
they bakers?
Nice. They were bakers. They worked for somewhere co-op, and they worked in the bakehouse of the co-op. And they used to go out and deliver the bread and everything as well. So,
all right, now I have a question. When I first read this, I thought it appeared in the newspaper first, and that the newspaper kind of did a retrospective book compiling days of yore, yesterday's Warminster, and but it was actually the other way around. It appeared in the book first, and then in 2006 was published in the newspaper.
Yeah.
What does WIL stand for here?
I've put that in because WIL is a Chapman code for Wiltshire. A lot of our counties in England have Chapman codes we use as a shortened form of the county.
So
if I was going to use that, I'd have to explain that this was a Chapman code, because I'd probably use a lot of
Chapman code. Never heard of it. I kind of was wondering if it was Wiltshire, but that's only because that's the only WIL thing I can think of for England. But that's me. And so thinking globally, we just type out the word Wilshire.
Yeah.
So Chapman codes are like our state abbreviations here in the U.S. I'm so glad we're thinking globally, guys. Very good.
I just put a link in the group chat for you for Chapman code.
Okay, thank you. It's a coding system used in genealogy. Wonder who wrote this. To identify administrative divisions in the United Kingdom, Ireland, Isle of Man, and the Channel Islands. So that would include Wales.
Mm-hmm.
And Scotland's still part of it. Okay, and it was created by this fellow, and it's a superset of an ISO. I don't know what a BS system is, although I'm not going to make any political statements about current presidents. So, okay. So these are the abbreviations. Okay, so consider writing out Wiltshire because I don't know these things.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the Bible. That was kind of an interesting story.
Yeah. The Bible gives out lists all these people that were born, and it's actually quite useful for my one name study. And it's got the and underneath it's got in full Emma and Robert and dates of birth as well. From what I knew that Emma and Robert were the parents of all these children, and years ago, I think it was something like 2000. I've got the date on here. Something 2006. So same year, I received a message through Genes Reunited because I'd put family and basic information up on Genes Reunited from somebody, and they said, I found this Bible in Stratford upon Avon years ago, and I think it's got all the family and that in there. They all seem to match what you've got on your family tree, and I want to pass it on to somebody in the family. So I got sent it. We got back to them. We got it sent to me, and I've now hold this family Bible, and we have no idea of how it got to where it was in Stratford upon Avon, because these people were not born in that county. They were born elsewhere. And we don't think that anybody that actually lives in Stratford upon Avon that's family member actually don't remember ever having seen this Bible. So
all right, and it looks like it's pretty much the same handwriting, isn't it?
Yeah. So we just think, yeah. I'm just wondering if it's one of the children that's written this at some point, because the parents' dates of birth are both out by 1 year. Because I've got the birth certificates for them and their registration and everything, and it all fits with that. So, and everything fits with all the information that I've got. I've now got information as regards christening dates and things, and everything like that all fits. So I know it's, and it's not a common enough surname that there would be another family with all these children with the same name
in that order, birth order.
Yeah. It's not like John Smith.
Yes. Well, and your homework brought into play the recommendation by Dr. Jones that when we have the originals of these kinds of unusual things, family Bible, etc., that they should be placed in a secure archive rather than staying in our personal collection. Because multiple descendants can then have access to it. Somewhere years ago when I first took a class in genealogy, they said if you go back like 4 generations, your ancestor could have 10,000 descendants, and you're just one. So as much as I love having 3 family Bibles, I need to consider that my children are not going to want them. I'm going to sneeze. Barely made that one and saved your ears, Cousin Russ. Anyway, good, interesting comment.
And I will mention that up until yesterday, I didn't know what page number the newspaper was on, but I do now because I got sent a PDF of the whole newspaper, and
Wow.
I now know what page it was on. So,
so you can update that.
So I updated my citation, because originally it said page unknown, and now it does say which page number it is.
I hear you. Okay. All right. Let's look at your citation for the Bible. So we said author unknown of the Family Bible. Well, I think that there are different books in the Bible. Let's talk about this. I understand it's in your personal collection and the address is withheld for private use. I'm going to sneeze again. Excuse me. Mr. Mert, can you please bring me some Kleenex? I'd appreciate it. So what we're actually citing are these notations on these 2 pages. So why don't we call them Family Bible entries?
Or notations in Family Bible or something like that.
Then we can clearly say author unknown, because there's nobody. Is there somebody that recognizes his handwriting?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The son of one of these people has seen it, and he didn't say he recognised the writing, so he didn't think it was his mother's writing or whatever.
Yes.
So,
okay. So that can make a difference, and we see that in Dave's homework and Cherie's homework, and Cherie's homework in particular, being able to identify the handwriting helps lend credibility to the information that person has written down. Very interesting. I'm glad that you received this. He's bringing me my Kleenex. I love it. So this person is giving you some provenance in the original message. Thank you, Mr. Mert. Youth Club, I rescued an old small family Bible which was being thrown out. All the names and dates of the Roslings in the back. Wow. And did he live in another country? This David?
No, he lives in the UK somewhere. I'm not sure where, because he sent it to me at my work address. So,
okay, all right. So, I agree that we could put a publication date of the Bible, and you could put discursive notes that all the handwriting appears to be the same, so it could have been copied from another source. It's all about the same handwriting, the ink, maybe they, you know how you fill out, let's see, what would the latest possible entry be, the 1910? Yeah.
So it's got to be after 1910, hasn't it? Because otherwise they wouldn't have known that.
World War I.
Oh, 1916.
Killed in action, yeah. So that would have a bearing, because that's part of our evaluating a family Bible. You know, is the handwriting the same? Is the ink the same or not? You know, do the dates of the events of birth, marriage, and death predate the publication date? That's another clue. It was copied from another source, etc. Okay. You know, it's really hard not to say, I'm really working on it. Okay, so thank you for this and for giving us some good thoughts about where to go from here if we run into this kind of a thing. Let's talk about Melinda's homework. Citing the provenance, again, is an issue. In her case, she's not here, so we can say whatever we wish. We just love her. The caption itself has a bearing on this, but can the information be corroborated? The provenance is an issue. I love her ancestors' piercing eyes. She gives you the information of the provenance, the original photograph inherited by Smehal, great-granddaughter Melinda, from her mother, from her father, who received it from his father. In a way, I like seeing that, Cousin Russ, because I lately have been going up to FamilySearch.org, and I've been finding some of my early Mormon pioneer ancestors' photographs that have been uploaded by the descendants who archived it. And how do I know that they didn't just pick a name out of a hat? How do I know that they arrived at the correct conclusion when all it says on the back is great-grandpa? Sometimes I even suspect when people buy photographs from antique stores, they'll be in a basket, a bunch of them. Do unscrupulous people handwrite crazy, the name of somebody so that they can sell it to somebody on eBay? If money's involved, I suspect it, because I don't know the provenance of it. There's a lapel pin, Dave. Ooh, that's interesting. There is a lapel pin. Of course, I don't recognize what the lapel pin is.
I can't make it out either. We'd have to ask Melinda.
Yeah. That could have a bearing, because here we're looking at something and it gives you an idea for another record group to search. And actually, when you think about it, that's a very light colored jacket, although he does have a hat. And there's some kind of a day book or something in his breast pocket there. There's a lot to discern from that. Thank you, Melinda. I like the provenance. I feel very confident this is actually who you think it is. Thank you. All right, Dave, you're up. You're on the hot seat now, babe. Okay. So you have two letters with completely different slants as far as the emotion of the writer. The first one, you don't know who wrote it, but tell us about, this is kind of a cute story, so tell us about it.
Yes, a member of the church handed it to me because he knows I'm a genealogist, and he just gave it to me. And I said, "Well, you got to put this in an archival sleeve and do this." And he said, "I don't care. So you can have it. I don't care about history. I only care about what's happening to me today." I said, "Oh, okay, fine. If you find anything else, let me know." This was pulled out of the inside of a wall where the electricians are doing some work, and it was nailed to the inside of the wall. And it's a bit of a rant, as I mentioned in here, and it's actually 4 pages long, and then the envelope is dated. But the only names he mentioned in here are the workmen, and a couple of actually he does say it's been occupied by several war veterans: Ed Morrill, Civil War, and Frank W. Ackerman, World War. Now it's not World War I yet because it's 1938. And he also mentioned a horrific storm that I'm familiar with in 1938. And then he goes on about the evil nature of some of the citizens of Ludlow, Mass. It's kind of scary a little bit. And he goes on. And he says, and he's not perfect either. So he's putting himself in that category. But anyway, he handed me the letter. And, I suppose, I'm sure I could. The house itself was built in the late 1700s. And this was an addition that was put on in 1938, obviously, and the whole house had been moved from its original location. But that's all background that I got from Greg. But I only wanted to cite the letter itself, and it's an untitled letter, an envelope, unknown author, private collection, etc., etc. So I think the citation, I think, should be satisfactory.
Yes, discovered September 2017, gifted to the researcher, page 1 of 4. This is another thing that bugs me. I've been part of the SLIG practicum, Advanced Evidence Analysis practicum, and one of our instructors did a great job labeling a folder that had multiple documents in it. And then it was page 1, 2, 3, 4 as the title for each document, the actual file name. And this page 1 of 4, if those 4 pages ever get separated, we've lost the citation that was more or less implied by the name of the folder. I like that each of your pages will have this citation.
Well, yeah, and if I didn't put 1 of 4, you wouldn't know if it's page 1 of 100 or page 1 of 12 or whatever. So that's, I mean, that's just a habit of mine, I guess.
Well, I think this is marvelous. When we don't know the author, we have a hard time evaluating the motivation of the writer, the author, which leads to our understanding of the credibility of the information he's providing, or she. Certainly, we're reacting to the hurricane in 1938, and that can be documented. I think the Weather Bureau keeps track of that here.
Well, there's actually signs all over this area of where the water level was in 1938.
Oh my gosh.
It's pretty scary. And the only other thing I can tell you is that it's all on one piece of paper. And you have to read this correctly, because this is page 1. Page 2 is actually here.
Yes.
And then he continued it over here, and then on the back page. So they're not paginated at all. You have to be able to discern what the message is in here in order to have the whole thing make sense. Otherwise, you read it out of order.
I hear you. It can be tricky. It's like when you write a letter and you think, I'm only going to write 2 pages, and then you keep going, you have to start putting the text somewhere else. And
or a gravestone that has the last 2 letters of the name above.
Yeah, they didn't have enough room. Yeah, didn't space it. Okay, so there's a question from the community. Carrie, talk to us about your comment.
I just wondered for the provenance if Gary's name should be added or the homeowner at the time, because it was gifted. Who was it gifted from? Was the homeowner involved? Clarity.
I was tempted to put his name in there, but in the interest of privacy, I didn't want to, I didn't want to give too much information because, well, it's just the way I felt. It was a momentary thing. I just, should I put his name in here? Then I decided not to. I just put the homeowner. What did I put?
I think that's up for discussion, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm conflicted on it myself. So I mean, I don't disagree with Carrie at all, but I'm still conflicted as to whether I should put someone's name in it.
He could have said it was in the wall, and maybe it wasn't.
Correct.
We're trying to get as exact as possible. What would you do, Carrie? Would you put it in there?
Even as the nail hole in the center of the whole thing.
Oh my gosh, hold that up. Let's get that.
Well, the envelope and the letter has the nail hole right there. I'm glad he was careful taking it off the wall rather than just because his sense of history is so low. You know what I mean? No respect. His respect for history is so low. He might have just ripped this thing off, but he did a nice job of taking it off. And anyway, that's the.
Okay. Well, interesting. Anyway. I'm glad that these are good things to question.
I think Valerie's got a good good answer part of the question. Go ahead.
And we got to get it moving along. Okay,
just really quickly, I would put the homeowner's name and address in my research notes, but leave it out of the public citation. And then when I added that, when he passes away, then I would adjust the public citation, maybe.
That's a possibility.
To respect his privacy.
I don't know who's going to outlive. He'll outlive me or I'll outlive him.
The genealogist is going to outlive them all.
Yeah. All right. I hear you. All right, let's move on to, and thank you for your homework. Thank you. Oh, this is a good one.
The next letter? Or are you moving on? I don't care. It doesn't matter.
I think we got to move on because I've got 2 more people to get to. But in your second letter, we knew who the author was.
Right.
It's signed. It's in a vertical file at a public library, the Springfield History Library and Archives. There's that Springfield, and we don't know where that Springfield is.
No, it says Springfield, Massachusetts.
Okay. Yeah. Well, no.
And this was a citation I wrote for the BU program, but
it's wonderful. Yes, there it is. Okay, I hadn't read all the way down. Let me move it up so people can see that citation. Very good. Thank you. 2 completely different letters. What a great bit of homework to have submitted. So, Cherie.
Yes, I'm here.
So published, oops, we got to scroll past Lisa. Close your eyes, everybody. Don't mean to drive you nuts. I know. Here we go. It must be coming up. Okay. I just love this picture. The the James Solomon family.
And that is all of their children, down to the very last baby, and the oldest son is the one on the far left, my left.
Yeah.
That's man standing, and then their youngest is the little baby sitting in the lap.
Oh my gosh. Good heavens. All right. So it shows up beautifully on the on the screen. When it's your address, you don't have to put your street address. Privately held thing. I wanted to remove that. You don't need to have all this for afternoon tea today.
Have them lined up around the block.
Yeah. Okay. And then you gave us some provenance, that it was owned by Richard Solomon.
And it still is. He sent me a digital image of the photograph. He emailed it to me.
Cool. Interesting that it's been trimmed.
I didn't ask. It looks like it's been torn in a few places. It looks like it might even be matting behind it, maybe.
Yeah. It's like it got put in an album of some sort. Not
one of the cardboard frames or something.
Yes. I don't know. Because these are uneven corners.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I'm so thankful to have it.
Oh, so am I. I mean, that's the only picture that for some of these children, they died when they moved to Kansas. After the first year, they lost about half of their family, died.
Oh, heartbreaking. All right, but I want to get on to the real fun of citation. Your example of the drawer. And those of you who've been coming to our Hangouts for a while, and this is 8:01, I think after this week I'll quit prefacing my announcements with the number of Hangouts we've done. But I'm pretty proud of you guys and the work that you do.
As you should be.
Really am. So you had this dresser drawer, and luckily you were moving it. Initially.
No. My cousin Darcy in Kansas. The whole reason I went to Kansas to see the damn drawer. She was her father gave it to her. It had belonged to our grandmother, and she removed all the drawers so it'd be easier to move upstairs. And as she was putting the drawers back in, she noticed writing on the back. So she took a picture and sent it to me and says, "Is this anything important?" And I said, "Oh my God."
So it was the property of James A. and Angeline Fulton Solomon. And Fulton was Angeline's maiden name, apparently.
Correct.
Who went by covered wagon from Shelbyville, Illinois to Tescott, Kansas about the time of the Civil War.
Yeah, she got it almost right. My grandmother, I don't believe, had any real interest in genealogy. I think that she was more about recording the provenance of the dresser, I think, than, getting her facts real straight. But the lineage is correct. They didn't come till 1883, and they came from Moultrie County, not Shelby County, but she got it pretty close.
Well, and maybe where they were was part of the county.
It's possible.
Then, but not at the time they actually left in out county boundaries.
Right. Exactly.
So, how do you know she wrote this?
Well, my uncle, as Darcy, she saw this and she called him over, and that's her father, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's my mother's writing." So
that helps because you're a couple of generations. She is the witness to who she knew her grandparents were.
The Imogene Besson Borgstadter, that is my grandmother's mother, one of the grandchildren.
Okay, so because your uncle could confirm that this was his mother's writing, we're now placing the witness that much closer to that earlier generation. So that leads us to believe her information may be credible.
Yes.
They're given to human error about dates in particular. So I love this thought about handwriting getting confirmed.
And that I probably, now that I think about it and you brought it up, I should have put that notes. However, it depends on what I was writing about. If I was writing an article about finding the dresser drawer, I would put all that in the narrative.
Yes.
I wouldn't include that in the citation.
Yes. So when we did an author of a letter, as opposed to the author of information provided on a dresser drawer, we put the author's name first, and then that it was a letter or a chest of drawers, and then who has the chest of drawers, where it is, that kind of a thing. But you have all the elements there.
Right.
So,
I followed, just like you be proud, Val. I followed EE's example of how to cite an artifact. So
citing an artifact puts the whoops, wrong camera, puts the artifact first as opposed to the author.
Right. Yeah.
And what if the chest of drawers was created or built by the author? Sometimes people sign their work. That might be a different thing.
That would be a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. We're not going to go there. Love your haircut. It's cute.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So, Carrie, thank you for your homework, though. I do appreciate all that you all do. Thank you, Cherie. So, Carrie, we have your homework, and we're talking about a fatal heart attack of a pioneer. And in your homework, I like that you went through and said, you know, you're getting lost with a lot of differences in style.
Correct.
It says this in EE for newspapers. The quick check model shows the publisher location before the title. And then there's the concept of, do we even use the word the in the citation if it's called the Spokesman Review?
Right. The book had a big aha moment in that there's 9 different versions of how you could list a newspaper. So that's why I went to Elizabeth Shown Mill's book, Evidence Explained, to see, well, how many takes would she have on it? And it took a variety of kind of locations, but there were some similar differences. So I wanted to make the point of changing the citation to look at each one. And I still think it's up to the judgment of the researcher. If it's not something that's going to be published to standards of some type of publication, then the researcher can really make their best choice about how they want to write up a citation. And to me, it's all about context. And throughout all today's discussion, I've seen context play a big role in what the source was, where you found it at the time, the information in the source compared to your research question. What's the context of how you'd write the citation? When you wrote the citation versus what Valerie said, she makes a lot of comments in her research notes. Well, if we're not of that vein to write stuff up right away, sometimes we have to have more stuff in our citation so that it makes sense about what our thought process was, because as we've learned over these 12 lessons, I'm going to remember just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then the researcher's knowledge at the time that they wrote the citation. We've seen various examples, like the Laird book that Valerie was talking about, that at the time she did the best she could. Now she changed many of those citations. So all that adds to the context of where everyone's citation's coming from.
It does. And these are important considerations. I'm certainly not going to fault Valerie for the citation style she used in that early time period. We did have lackeys cite your sources at that time, but I don't think Elizabeth's little white book, evidence, exclamation point, I have it around here somewhere. I'm not sure that was published then yet. Yeah, that's the one, Citation and Analysis for the Family Historian. That came having, she tipped her hat to Cite Your Sources by Lackey, but elaborated or added more. And then, boy, did her mind expand when it came to the 900 plus pages of Evidence Explained. So there's no totally right answer, just choices that the researcher must make. And I think that this can be stated again, as I did earlier, that what has occurred is our brains are getting kicked in gear, because we have 2 of the genealogy vertical standard bearers having us tackle citations from their point of view. And that is, as we're comparing and contrasting Elizabeth to Dr. Jones, we're able to differentiate and see little subtleties of what we might have. Shri, you wanted to say something? You want to voice that for the recording?
Oh, writing a citation is a craft. It's almost an art form. I think you should be able to master in citation writing, maybe.
As long as we don't take the Picasso approach where things are sliding off the edge of our research desks. I hear you.
There should be a master's degree or something given that work.
I know, but they're making us think about the provenance, about the motivation, about the informant. They're making us look at what is it we're actually looking at, as opposed to, think of the multiple examples of Hillary's birth entry for a 1902 birth or marriage or whatever. We've seen multiple examples of that, and it's brought to the forefront because of the generosity of you, our volunteer panelists, who look to your own homework or look to your own research when coming up with your homework responses to a chapter. Thank you very much. We're going to be meeting next week. Let me pull up where this conversation continues, Cousin Russ, and talk to us about that.
I just put a link in the unified chat, so the conversation continue in the Dear Myrtle genealogy community from that link that's there, so that we all can communicate with one another, make comments based on the recording. It's best to watch it here in this format, and because all the links and comments are here, it continues in the Dear Myrtle community.
Yes, and I want to give a shout out to Deneen. I don't know if she's here, but when we met Monday, I think it was, yes, we talked about some things that we might put on the docket for next year. And so in response to that post for Mondays with Mert, she said, I would like for the future to hear more about the judicious use of ancestries we're related at, and also precisely how Cousin Russ does that DNA overlay thing. And now you see that response in context, because you can go up above and click and view the whole hangout that's on that topic. The Hessian soldier, just give me a quick overview of the Hessian soldier scenario, Cousin Russ, because that conversation went on for 2 years.
It did. We did at Roots Tech, we did a hangout from the Nerve Center, and conversation started. And while we all were in Salt Lake City, several of us went across to the library and did some research on the Hessian soldier, and then kept that conversation going on, and it has gone on for 2 years after the event. So
yeah,
it was all good conversation.
You never know. You never know. So tonight we are going to be having a hangout, Wacky Wednesday. I won't be here, but Cousin Russ will be here, and one of my very distant cousins will be here. Cousin Russ is going to show us the setup for his scanning and the project that he's working on right now. So we're going to have some physical descriptions, slides, etc., and he's going to talk about that process. So that's what we're going to do for Wacky Wednesday. Then on Saturday evening, we're going to be doing Who's in My Line? And that's what's happening the rest of this week over at hangouts.dearmyrtle.com. Anything else before we go, Cousin Russ?
I think we're good to go.
We're good to go. Okay, well, on behalf of Cousin Russ and our panelists, thank you all for coming today. Nothing left to say, but I'm Dear Myrtle, your friend in genealogy. Happy family tree climbing, everybody. That's a wrap.